Welcome to Raising Eight, the podcast that proves a full house is more than just a TV show. Meet the dad who's raised 8 kids and 2 grandkids under one roof and has the scars and dad jokes to show for it. Grab a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and let's talk family, big family.
Good morning, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. This is episode 4 of Raising 8, One Dad's Stories of a Full House. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've listened to the other 3 episodes, and there'll be a few more. I pretty much got you up to speed. I'm at this point, I have 6 kids. I'm a single dad, and I'm dating a woman with 2 kids, 2 more girls, so 7 daughters and a son. But I want to shift gears a little bit today, and this is more of an advice or awareness podcast about discipline. So we all know this is one of the, for dads, this is a big thing, and for moms too, of course. But, you're thinking about this as you're thinking about being a dad. These are these pieces that, don't really want to do, but you don't want to have bratty kids either, or kids that are, uncontrollable or don't take direction or things like that. And I thought the best way to do that was kind of talk about generational discipline. So I have not told you my entire story about being a child, and I'm not going to do that today. But I will tell you that I did not have an ideal childhood as far as a role model as a father. I loved my dad. He passed away when I was 19 years old. I loved a lot of things about him. And if you asked my sisters and brother about my father, you would get a completely different view. And I think that's because I was the youngest and we were better off economically at some point. I think I mentioned that before. We moved to Poway after living in San Diego. But I can tell you, generationally, as the way my father raised us versus the way I raised my kid versus the way I'm raising grandkids, or it's very it's very aligned with society actually. So my dad was my dad drank a lot, and he did a lot of things with me that would probably get him arrested these days. And I'll give you a couple stories about that. But I will say that I had a lot of reverence for my father and respect. And my mom helped me with that when I got a little older. After my dad passed away, my mom and I spent a lot of time together because I was working nights and I was able to have conversations with her when I came home from work at 8:30 or 9 in the morning. She was retired at the time, so we were able to just chat. And she told me a lot about my dad's upbringing and things like that. And things, kind of the pieces fell into place about why he was who he was. And I got a really good opportunity to understand him as a person and understand my mom as a person too. We kind of never really think about that, right? We just think our parents are our parents and they're good at this and they're bad at that. And they don't, and our kids don't always understand where we came from or what experiences we had in life. Because frankly, we don't sit down with our kids and tell them all the bad things and sometimes not all the good things. And I don't think it's a bad thing to do. I think it's important for us, for our children to know us as human beings and not just this, mother figure or father figure that is always giving them bad news. Because, right, so a lot of times we feel like as kids that we're always getting told no. And I'll get to my dad real quick, but I want to tell you, my mom had this great saying, and I've mentioned it before, to say she heard from a priest to say no as little as possible. And when you do say no, have a good reason for it. Um, as you're going through life as a father, you're going to find out that you make a bigger deal about a lot of things than they really are. And I would say that you probably do that in life, period. And sometimes we look back and we go, that probably wasn't that, in the whole scheme of things, it wasn't that big a deal. The kids did this or the kids did that. Or you might have this at work where, we kind of over exaggerate things in the moment. And then we look back and go, it really wasn't that big a deal. So my dad, like I said, he drank a lot, and I'll kind of go backwards. When I was about 12 years old, we were getting ready to move to Poway, and the realtor that we had lived on the same street. So my dad went to sign some papers or something. I went with him. I was 12 years old, like I said, and I went with him. And this was in Poway, and we lived in East San Diego, so it was about a 20-minute drive home. And he starts drinking with this realtor, and this realtor's drinking hard liquor. I remember looking at it in a glass. It was like whiskey or scotch or something like that, or scotch whiskey. And I don't know what my dad was drinking, but my dad was a lightweight. He only had 3 or 4 beers. He was plowed. Um, he was thin, about 6 feet tall, probably weighed 165 pounds, which that's what I weighed in high school. And so by the time we leave the house, my dad is plowed, and we're driving home. Driving down to 163 was the 15, and then it turned into the 163. And if you know this area, when you're in Kearney Mesa, to get on the 805, there's this big sweeping turn. You take the right lane and it sweeps around to the left, then you get on the 805. And my dad is falling asleep while we're driving. I mean, he is literally falling asleep, and we're doing 65, 70 miles an hour, whatever. And he's getting very close to this wall on this turn. And if you've never been on it, it's just a sweeping, left-hand turn. And he's falling asleep, and I'm waking him up, trying to say things to him, to ask him questions and things like that. And thank God he got me home. I mean, I got home alive. My mom was so pissed when I got home at my dad for driving in that shape. And I don't ever really remember him driving drunk like that. And but I remember this vividly. And like I said, it was October 3rd, 1974, because we moved in on the 4th. Once I got home, my mom was like, "Oh, thank God you're safe." My dad goes out and gets in a bar fight or something, probably hustling somebody in pool. And on Saturday morning, we wake up and here he's got his sunglasses on and he's lying on the couch asleep. So my mom wakes him up, says, "Hey, we got to move today, this and that." So he gets up, and his entire left eye is just black. I mean, somebody punched him. I don't know what happened, but he got some wounds from that, like a black eye. And then we moved to Poway and we lived happily ever after. Well, it wasn't that easy, but when I was, I think this happened more than once. My dad would go stop at this bar called the Tower. It was right by our house in East San Diego. And he would bring me in the bar and I would sit at the end. And I was, a little kid, like 10 or 11 years old, maybe even younger. And he'd get me a Roy Rogers, which is a 7 Up, excuse me, a Coke and grenadine with a cherry in it. And I would sit at the end of the bar and drink this thing where he sat down with his friends and smoked and drank, and the bar smelled like stale beer and cigarettes. And then we'd have a couple of beers. Now we were only about a block from home. I mean, really close to home. So I would imagine he drove me home. I don't know how else I would have got home. However, he did leave me in the parking lot once. He said he was going to go in real quick and talk to somebody. And about 45 minutes or an hour later, I just got out of the car and walked home. And my mom's like, "Where's your father?" I said, "I don't know. He's at the tower." And again, not great for their relationship. So on the discipline side of things, though, since I had watched my brothers and sisters grow up, I knew where the line was drawn, right? And I was a good kid. I mean, I was the youngest kid. So my parents would go to work, my sisters would watch me, and I hung out with nice people. I wasn't in any, trouble like that. And my brothers and sisters, I don't think were either. I know my brother was sometimes would be doing some things that he shouldn't be doing, and my sister hung out with some questionable people. But all in all, I mean, no one really got in trouble or anything. No one was arrested, I don't think, and that's always good. And I've never been arrested, but it's early. Just kidding. I'm not going to get arrested. Um, so I always knew that when my dad had the look, right? He had that look that when he looked at you like that, you knew shut the hell up. He could make me cry with that look. But I'll tell you one instance, and I've talked about this on my podcast before. Talk about generational discipline. My brother was driving down the street in his 55 Chevy, and I had a football in my hand, and I was about 10 years old, and I had a really good arm. In fact, I had been in the Junior Olympics in the softball throw and the shot put and some other things, and I could really whip a football, pretty good. So he's driving down the street, probably doing, I don't know, 20 miles an hour. And I threw the football, hit his car, and hit him right in the face while he was driving through his passenger window or through his window. And he stops the car immediately, chases me into the house, which my brother was very fast runner, but on that day I was faster than him because I was scared he was going to beat the crap out of me, which I deserved, by the way. And I got in the house and I got behind my dad, and he's like, "What's going on?" And my brother tells him what happened, and my dad reaches around and grabs me and punches me or slaps me or something right in the head. And I went down to the ground. And my mom, I remember saying, she yells to my dad, "Gary, not in the head." And I'm thinking to myself, how about don't hit Ed? But listen, I deserved it. He could have killed somebody in that car if there was a kid in front of him or something. I made him swerve. And I deserved every bit of that punch, right? And I had friends that I grew up with that got beatings. I mean, and we never got that. Um, we weren't kids that got beat a lot because we were good kids. We weren't doing too many things. My mom did have I'm looking at this picture that it's a thumbnail for my podcast, and there's a woman holding a wooden spoon. And we did not get the wooden spoon. We got the metal fly swatter. So my mom had this metal fly swatter, multiple ones of them, by the way. And she would hit us in the back of the legs because we wore shorts most of the time. And she'd whip us in the back of the legs with that thing if we did something stupid or, talk back to her or whatever. And it didn't really hurt. It was more of a shock that she was even able to hit us. My mom was only 5'2", and I probably outweighed her when I was 6. So um, those were those things, and that was just that generational thing. I mean, if somebody in our neighborhood would have spanked us for something that we did really bad, my parents would probably go, "Well, you shouldn't have done it," right? It wasn't this crazy attitude about hitting kids. And back then, you see movies and TV shows about them spanking their kids on a regular basis. And it just was generationally, it was what it was. I mean, there were people that would literally beat the crap out of their kids, and we weren't those kids. But the only other time my dad spanked us, we were in Spokane, Washington. I remember when my dad spanked us one time, and it was kind of a joke. Um, and I think we were laughing, and that's why he spanked us because we were going to sleep. And then once he left, we started laughing again. So But I can tell you that I was at a football, no, I was at a high school dance one time at Poway High School. And I think my parents dropped us off. Like they would drop us off and we would go to the dance and they'd pick us up at 10 o'clock or whatever it was over. And the dances were fun and they had them quite often. So we would go there and, try to find girlfriends and things like that and hanging out with our buddies. And I can remember one time our parents dropped us off and we were in the quad at Poway High School. You may know what that is or not. And one of the people that went with us, one of the guys, his mother came into the quad and the dance hadn't started yet. So we're all just kind of hanging around, grabbing ass, whatever we were doing with our friends. And this woman grabbed this kid by the hair. We had kind of long hair and drug him out of the school. I mean, it was so humiliating for this poor kid. And his mom was a psychopath anyway. She was our neighbor. And we told my dad about it when he got there, and he felt so bad for the kid. Because see, my parents would never do that. My dad would never embarrass me. He would never yell at me in front of other people. He might give me the look in front of other people, but he would never embarrass us like that, and my mother either. So this is just that generational discipline, right? Those were the days when if you spanked your kid, everyone just went, "Well, you shouldn't have done whatever you did." Did people take it over the line? Of course they did. There's always somebody that's going to take something over the line, or they don't do any discipline, and you have these kids that are just out of control. So let's move into me raising kids in this generation, right? In the 90s, or late 80s, then the 90s and the 2000s. I am not a spanker. I've spanked my kids, I don't know, once or twice. I don't even, I mean, most of them never got any spanking. They were good kids. They knew the rules. I had the look. I could give them the look when they did something wrong. They weren't doing things, and I'm going to tease you again. When they were teenagers, I probably should have spanked them, but we'll get into that later because there's some good teenager stories coming, by the way. But when they were young and in elementary school, they were reverent to us, to Kit and I, and we didn't have a lot of problems with them. They didn't backtalk us. They didn't do, um, they didn't have behavioral problems in school. We were pretty disciplined. We had a very tight schedule, so we stayed on the schedule. I thought it was important to have that kind of discipline to keep the kids knowing what they were going to do. We had chores on Saturday that we did. No one ever argued. They kind of went. I've only argued with a couple of my kids in my entire life, and there's and I'll bring that back up when we get later to the grandkids because the only kids I've ever argued with really were the two kids that I'm raising their my grandkids. That's another story. So when you think about so then let's move on. So my kids, you know, yes, there were some issues when they were teenagers. They made some bad decisions and we had to nip that in the bud. But for the most part, discipline was the easiest part for us. Now, if you don't know me, I'm 6'2", like 265 now, and I'm big. I have a lot of tattoos now. I didn't have those back then, but I was still a good sized man. So when I look down at my kids and they're 3 feet tall, I could intimidate, I could intimidate them. Now, I didn't do that because I was trying to be this controlling man. I did it when I had to make a point at times. And I'm glad I brought up that word controlling because if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm very controlling, but and I hope it's not in a negative way. I say it in this respect. If there's an event going on, for instance, and I'm involved in a group of people, I will take charge of that group if I have the opportunity. And I like to control the outcome. And there was no different in our house. I was very much controlling. I didn't control my wives or my girlfriend at the time, Kit, but I definitely had a plan most of the time and still do. I was raised by a Navy father. My wife was raised by a Navy father. So we had, that on time thing, right? If you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. So it's funny when we go places now, we're always on time. And when I say we're leaving at 8:30, we're leaving at 8:30. And the kids adapted to that. So it wasn't a real issue. So I didn't have that discipline problem. They were good about getting up. I had a couple laggers, but typical teenagers. And now we move into this new generation, this two grandkids that I'm raising, and now we have a whole another set of discipline. In my opinion, it's a lack of discipline now. This is just me talking. So these parents that are raising kids, my children, have more discipline or less discipline than I had, than I raised my kids with. I have less discipline than my parents raised. And the kids that I see now raising little kids have even almost no discipline. We've lost a lot of that in the schools. We've lost a lot of it in society. You can see it in the workplace. You can see it in entitlement, which I really hate that word, but it's so true that kids these days think they're entitled to things. In this picture I was looking at of the generational discipline, there's a kid with headphones in, and we see that a lot. We see the kids just walking around with their head in the phone. I see it at the gym every morning, and they're not engaged in what's going on around them. And God forbid you ask them to get engaged, or and I could see it last night. We were at back to school night for Piper, and you can see the difference in me versus another dad there and the way they talk to their children. I always thought that we talk to our children, not at them. And when I see a man, and no offense if this is you, baby talking a 10-year-old child, it drives me nuts because it's not real world stuff. And if you're baby talking, listen, I've worked with men 20 years ago that were baby talking their 25-year-old. And I feel like I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think that, you're going to get treated like that in the rest of the world. My parents made us do things like, let's say we were calling for pizza. They made us get on the phone and dial the phone and call so we could be good communicators with society, right? That we could talk to people if they asked us a question. We just didn't get it and go, yeah, yeah, yeah. We engaged in conversation. Our kids, all good communicators. They could just about every one of them can get up in front of a room and talk and speak very eloquently about whatever the topic they're speaking of. Some of the kids might have been a little bit more shy, but that's not unusual, seeing how 80% of people, adults, don't even want to speak in front of people. So our kids, because we interacted with them a lot and we had a lot of conversations with them and we spoke of things, we used to sit at dinner for like an hour after dinner was over and just talk about their day and talk about different situations and things and encourage them to participate in these conversations. And they were fabulous at it. They were really good. And it's helped them in life. My grandson, very eloquent. He can go to, when we used to take him to church all the time. Excuse me. When we used to take him to church, we still go to church. He doesn't go as often as I'd like him to. He would work the crowd like a politician. I mean, he knew how to speak to people, and people were responsive to him, and he could carry on a conversation. So these are those discipline pieces. These are, whether you think it's discipline or not, you're teaching your kids discipline when you're talking to them and engaging them in a conversation. Somebody told me the other day that their friend had a father that said that, look, I'm done training you. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting word to use instead of raising. I'm done training you. Our children are not puppies. We don't train them to go tinkle outside and sit when we tell them to. I want my kids to be people. I want them to have their own personalities. And I can tell you, if you have multiple children at some point in your life, you're not going to believe how different your children are. And I spoke about this in my first podcast on this series, how no child is raised in the same household because of economic differences and age differences and all these things. And it really blows me away when I look back and I look at all the kids and how different their personalities were, even though they all got the same information, right? We were giving them all the same information at the same time, and they assimilated that information differently. And it's amazing how different your children will be. And for you out there that have multiple kids, I know you agree with me. There's some similarities, but for the most part, they're very different people, and they should be treated as such. I had to learn different ways to talk to my kids, depending on which one I was talking to. God, it must be really dry outside because I'm just having a hard time. So when you talk about that generational, like I said, you can see it. It parallels business. It parallels life. You can see how people are acting up in society. Um, and they could have been doing that the whole time, and we didn't have social media to show us that they were acting up like that. But I really don't think so. Now, speaking of social media, I obviously had none when I was growing up. We had dial phones, and they were attached to the wall. My kids did not get cell phones, and it was more of a safety feature than anything until the 90s. And even though the internet was starting to turn and burn, the social media was nothing like it is now. I mean, zero. There was texting. I don't remember the kids having any social media uh, access. And I mean, I guess in the, 2012, 2013, we started getting Facebook and things like that where they were, but my kids, a lot of them were already adults by then. So they weren't, they've managed to get on whatever social media they were. And my kids aren't crazy social media people either. I'm probably on social media more than they are, but I use it for business and I use it for personal use too. But these kids these days are so inundated with it. Last night at this back to school night, they talked about AI and how the kids are tempted to use it or use their phone while it's on their desk, things like that. Now, where Piper goes to school, they don't allow that. The phone has to be put away. So, which I love that. I know my older kids, a couple of or my middle kids, we'll call them, since I have had their phones taken away in high school for doing whatever, probably for texting. I had one daughter that could text with one hand on the old flip phones faster than I can type on a keyboard. So she could communicate with people, and she did, and she got in trouble for it too sometimes. Now, when I say in trouble, I didn't beat my kids. I told you that before. They would get something probably taken away, something valuable. I can remember one time somebody lit matches or something in the house, and we smelled the matches and we found the burnt matches, and no one would fess up to who did it. And I know that only 5 girls were home. We know who was home. I knew who did it, but um, I wanted them to come clean, right? So they wouldn't come clean. I had them lined up in the hallway against the wall like a firing squad. And I'm going to each kid and saying, "Did you do it? No. Did you do it? No. Did you do it? No." And like I said, we know who did it. So what I did is I took the kid that I know absolutely did not do it, and I took something away from her. And I said, and I think it was something with her birthday or something. I don't remember what it was. And she starts to tear up, like, "Why are you taking it from me?" I said, "Because I know you did it, and this and that." Now, I know she didn't do it, but I was trying to get the other kid to have some compassion for her. And I got her, as far as I remember, that kid never stepped up, and I didn't take anything away from the child that didn't do it, by the way. Now, we're going to talk about teenage years in another episode, and that person's going to come back up, by the way. So, when you're out there, so you're this father and you're making sure your kids are fed and you're making sure your kids have a house, a roof over their head, and you're making sure they're disciplined. You want kids that, I don't know how many times I took my kids to a restaurant or church and people say, "I can't believe how well behaved your kids are." And it wasn't because we threatened them, it was because we showed them how to have manners. We taught them to please and the thank yous and how to act in public. And we'd see other kids that were acting up and people would let them crawl on the floor in a restaurant. We never did that. Um, we really taught the kids that they needed to act right when they were in public. Now, I wish somebody would teach a lot of these parents how to act right in public that I see on a regular basis, sometimes at school, sometimes in the grocery store. But you see, those people never had any discipline when they were younger. And that's my opinion. I don't want any flack on that. I'm telling you, I've managed hundreds of people in my life, and I can tell you the ones that had parents that managed their discipline and kids that didn't have any discipline when they were younger. We all know those kids in high school that had zero discipline. But I can tell you, when I went to high school, more kids had discipline than my kids when they were in high school and the kids these days, because I see how they dress now. I see how they talk to people. I see the correspondence from Poway Unified School District on behavior. And I'm like, we really have, it's kind of like telling somebody that you don't eat, you know, you don't drink lighter fluid. They have to put on there that this is not consumable. Really? When we were kids, we knew not to drink lighter fluid unless you're Gene Simmons and you're trying to spit fire, which we probably tried when I was a kid. I can't remember. But anyway, that's episode 4. That's about discipline, right? Parents, fathers, it's your responsibility. It's also the mother's responsibility to discipline your kids. And I don't mean with a whip. I mean with talking to your kids and showing them the right way to behave. And I'll tell you one quick thing, and I think I said this in an episode earlier, that my son was kind of acting up when he was like 2 years old. And we took him to the doctor. And we were always going to the doctor with this kid. I mean, it was only our second child, and my wife at that time just, well, we take him to the doctor. I don't know why I can't get him to do this or that. And the doctor says to her, "Well, you just have to reason with them." And I'm like, "No, you don't reason with a 2-year-old. You just can't reason with a 2-year-old. They have no reasoning ability." He used to take his diaper off. You'd put a diaper on him, he'd take it off, and you know what he did. So I got some duct tape and I duct tape that diaper on him. When his diaper was wet or he needed to be changed, I cut the duct tape off and do it again. He got the point after a while that he doesn't take his diaper off. These are how you have to, talk to your kids and figure out what that hot spot is for them, how you can teach them things to do and what not to do. And this podcast was a lot of that, the things you do and things you not to do. I can tell you this, the kids that don't have discipline are problem adults, guaranteed 100%. Like I said, you can think I'm wrong. Trust me, if they have a discipline problem when they're little and no one ever addresses it, they're going to be problem adults. They're going to be problem athletes. They're going to be problem students, and they're just going to be have a problem in their entire life. And listen, I know people my age that didn't have good discipline, and they're a pain in the ass now. So discipline's a super important thing. It kind of goes back to that love. If you love somebody, that's all you need. No, you need a bunch of other things. You can love your children. Not disciplining them is showing that you don't love them. I wouldn't get that drastic, but if you're not disciplining them, you're not doing them any favors, believe me. They need to be able to follow instructions. They need to be and I don't mean follow the crowd, but I mean act correctly, learn how to be articulate, do all those things. So that's episode 4. We're getting close to this teenage years. This is the teenage years are just going to be the most interesting because now you have like discipline meets. Maybe I push the envelope a little bit, and my kids push the envelope a little bit. But that's okay. Looking back, I can laugh about it now. Was not super funny when it was happening. So anyway, thank you for listening to the Ed Franklin Not No Limits podcast. This was Raising 8, episode 4. I'll get another episode out early next week. And the teenage, it's coming, man. I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy that piece of it. And I hope it's going to teach you some lessons too. So thank you very much for listening. And I will, happy Friday, by the way. Have a great weekend. And I will talk to all of you soon.